Welcome to Becoming a Cook. I'm Charlie Wetzel. Today I want to teach you how to make post-Turkey Day gumbo. So every time I cook a turkey, I always plan to make gumbo the next day. At the end of the day, I have a platter of meat that's left over. I have my carcass, and that includes the skin and everything else that came off of it. And then I've got meat that's been picked from it. And that's the start of a great gumbo. I've already put all my turkey parts in my stock pot, and I'm going to make stock with this. So I'm going to start by getting this over to the stove, putting some water in it, and getting it going. I want to just cover the bones with water. I'm going to bring that to a boil. I'm going to skim it, and while that's working, I'm going to chop my onions, celery, and bell pepper, and my sausage. I've got one good-sized bell pepper, 3 medium onions, and 3.5 celery stalks. I've done other videos on how to cut a bell pepper, how to cut an onion, how to cut celery. So if that's new to you, go ahead and tune into those before you do this part. The way that you tell whether this is the right proportion is by the color. Before I start on the next thing, let me check on my stock. So it's not boiling yet, but I'm going to keep an eye on it. Actually, I'm going to keep an ear on it because I'm listening for it while I'm working. If you watch my chicken gumbo recipe, you'll know that I do 2 kinds of sausage. I do kielbasa and I do andouille, preferably andouille from Louisiana, which is what this is. This is a pound of each. I'm going to cut this into rounds, and then this I'm going to quarter it and then cut it into chunks. This is spicy, so that's why I want the pieces smaller. I've made gumbo since my kids, well, since before they were born, but I started serving to them as soon as they were, old enough to eat solid food. Like most little kids, they didn't like spicy food. In my gumbo, I don't add any spice other than the spice of the andouille, but if you avoid the andouille, you avoid most of the spice. So that's what our kids did when they were little. They would just eat the round ones and leave the other ones on the side. You can see with these, as I cut them, I'm just using my finger to straighten this so that I can have roughly similar sizes. I'm trying to get all this prep done before my stock comes to a boil. This is the turkey that I pulled off of the carcass. And then this, when I did my sacrificial turkey stock, I saved the dark meat because it's still got enough flavor to be used in the gumbo, and then I just vacuum packed it so that it would keep well. This is kind of like a block of turkey. Now I can hear my stock is starting to boil, so I'm going to go over and take care of that. This, because it was already roasted and did not have any raw turkey in it, is not producing the same amount of scum that a normal stock will. I just want to get this little bit of foamy stuff off the top, and then I want to make sure this doesn't boil over. I'm going to turn it down, and I'm going to cover it. I just want to look at this. Any pieces that I see that are bigger than you'd want in a spoon, I want to give a cut. So if you didn't do the sacrificial turkey and you didn't have this right here, even this would be enough for your gumbo, along with the sausage. This is actually turkey fat that I saved and separated from the little bit of pan drippings that were left in it, because you don't want any water in that fat when you start your roux. So I've got maybe 1/3 of a cup here. I'm just going to add canola oil to this until I get up to 3/4 of a cup. When you cook, you really need to use all of your senses. So while I was working over doing the prep, I was listening for the stock. As you're working, you're not only just focused on what you're doing, but you should use as many of your senses as you can to keep track of things in the kitchen. In martial arts, they call it zanshin. It's that awareness around you. I'm usually trying to do that. Grab my gumbo pot. Let's make a roux. The first thing I'm doing is I'm heating my pan because I want to start with a hot pan with the cold oil. So I want to go ahead and put my oil in, and I'm going to have my flour close by and ready to go. Now there may be a little bit of sizzle here because as careful as I was about getting the moisture out of the turkey fat, there could be just a little bit of moisture in it. I'm going to go ahead and put my 1.5 cups of flour in here. Because I used the turkey oil in this, this may brown a little bit faster than just plain canola oil would. I've already got stuff turning brown on the edges here, so I've got to turn this down a little bit so that it doesn't burn. With a roux, you can't walk away from it because it'll burn on you. You can see this is already starting to get to be a nice color. I'm going to grab my veggies and keep them close by, because when this is ready for the veggies, I'll have to act quickly. I want to get to the color of peanut butter, or slightly darker. If I start to see black, then I'm cooking on heat that's too high. You want to be really careful not to splash yourself with a roux. This fat may be 400 degrees. When the fat hits you, it sticks. So we're getting close to our color here. I'm going to turn this back up to high, and then I'm going to add my veggies. And do them all at once, as quickly as you can, and then you immediately want to stir. I put this back up on high, and the reason I'm doing that is I want these veggies to cook. The smell that comes up from these vegetables in a roux, oh my gosh. This smell defines Louisiana and its cooking to me. So you can see this has gotten darker. You can see underneath how this is sizzling, and on the bottom side, this is cooked more. All right, I'm gonna turn this down a little bit. Once again, I'm using my nose, and it smells like it's cooking a little bit fast. The bell peppers have gone from a bright green, they're just starting to turn a little bit darker. Now I'm going to take my sausage and add that. This starts to cook the sausage a little bit and gets the flavor going in there. By the way, the pot that I'm working in is an 8-quart. It needs to be something with a heavy bottom. If it's a really skinny pot, like a stock pot that's really thin, you're going to burn your roux. Ideally, you'd work in one pot to make the whole gumbo, but if you had to make your roux in a cast iron skillet and then move it over to your stock pot to cook it once you put the liquid in, you could do that. If you use a cast iron skillet, just be really careful. The sides are low, and it's easier for you to splash yourself. Let's check our stock. I'm going to taste that. Sometimes when I do my stock, I actually make it on Thanksgiving night. The advantage of that is it gives me the opportunity, if I want to reduce the stock and make it more concentrated. I'm going to go ahead and turn off this stock and start using it. I use a strainer, and I just start ladling it in right here. If you don't own a strainer, I strongly recommend that you get one. If you're ever going to make stock, you'll use it for the next 10 years. I'm going to turn the gumbo back up onto high heat. I've given it a stir so that I don't have any clumps of roux in here. I also recommend you get a ladle. I bought this at a restaurant supply store. I've probably had it at least 20 years. This has come to a vigorous boil. I'm now going to turn it down, and I'm going to add my turkey. I've got so much turkey this time, I'll barely have room for okra. I would recommend that you try using okra at least once. It's different in a gumbo. Stephanie despised okra until she had gumbo with okra in it, and then she's like, These okra don't look perfect, unfortunately, but you got to take what you can find in the grocery store sometimes. They'll be all right. They're also a little bit larger than I like to use. If you can find small okra that don't have any blemishes on them, that's what you would want to get. I'll use frozen okra if I don't have any other choice. If I get an okra that is really, really tough and fibrous, I'm just going to throw it in the discard pile. When you're cutting a really fibrous okra, I mean, you can feel it. It just resists. I'm feeling it here with this, so let's see which one it is. It's not that one. That one's okay. That's the one. That sound is an indication that it was tough. Let's go taste the gumbo and see how close we are. This is looking pretty good. I've not yet added any salt, but I brined this turkey and it had salt in it. I'm sure I'll have to add salt, but I don't want to start adding it until I've tasted it. That's a good principle anyway. The flavor's good, and it actually tastes like it's got enough salt. It may need some after I do the okra, because it'll absorb some. It's got really good turkey flavor. The consistency of this is pretty good. You can see it's not super, super thick, but the okra is going to thicken it. I'm bringing it back up to a boil, and I'm going to add the okra. I want to make sure it comes to a boil again, and then I'm going to turn it down to a simmer. And you can see I've got a little bit of space left in this pot. Now, I can just leave it as it is, but I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more because that'll give us more gumbo. I don't dare make it any fuller than that. The okra dropped the temperature a little bit. the stock, which is still really hot, but it's not boiling. Drop the temperature a little bit, but now it's come to a boil. I'm going to drop that down to a simmer. I'll let that cook until the okra is tender. I'm going to guess 10 minutes. Typically with these things, you bring to a boil. After that, if you go down to the lowest, you can always come up a little bit, up a little bit. If you start too high, then you could have a boil over. I'm going to add a little bit of black pepper and just the tiniest bit of salt. It's really, really close. I don't mind if people at the table add salt. You know, that's never a bad thing to me. But if I put too much salt in it, they don't have any choices at that point. The okra cooked for 10 minutes. It's now tender. If you want a little bit less prominent okra flavor, go another 5 minutes before you serve it. When you serve this, just put a little bit of rice in the bottom of your bowl and then ladle the gumbo on top. This is an 8-quart pot, so that's 2 gallons of gumbo. You can serve a pretty good size group with that. I always make more than we need in the typical meal. Part of that's because we like leftovers. Part of that's because if you're going to go to all the work, why not? Why not have more than one meal out of it? This is my post-Turkey Day gumbo made with turkey, sausage, and okra. It's a great way to finish the holiday with your turkey.